Let me go ahead and get started. I'll pray for us, and then we'll dive in. Father, thank you for your mercy and for the great privilege of being able to learn this ancient language. And it's our fondest desire that we would be able to think your thoughts after you. And thank you for giving us access to this language. We confess that this is hard. And you say, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And so we come asking that you will help us in our ability to read this language. I pray you encourage us together. I pray the end result that this will be a means of grace in our lives to see the beauty of the meta-narrative, beauty of the whole Bible, biblical theology. And would you use even this class as a means of grace in our lives? And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so I wanted to start out with something that I've been doing at my classes at Bryan, and I found it helpful. And I used to never do this, and now I'm constantly doing it. But what did you find interesting about the homework as you worked through this? Did you have an aha moment? Did you have something that you came to and said, "Wow, I don't really get what that's about"? Tell me about your interaction so far with what we're doing for tonight.
Well, I had looked at several things on YouTube, and as I was looking at them on YouTube, it was a lot of them who actually said some of those same vocabulary words. And as they were saying them, it was like locking in my mind certain ones, and then it was showing us in the Bible where they were. So that was, helping me a lot right there.
Yeah, I think for me, the more different people I can hear from, sometimes that helps me get something. And I found the resources on YouTube are great. I mean, there are a lot of really good Hebrew readers, and the material out there. And you read several different books, you realize that they kind of differ on some of the finer points. But the great thing about Hebrew is you don't have to be perfect with everything. It's really pretty simple language. And so you listen to me, you listen to other people, you read some in books, and between all of it, one of those things is going to click. And when it only has to click once, and then you've got it. So that's good. That's good. Well, what else did you guys find interesting or helpful or confusing?
I find that it has been significantly easier to learn words by learning scripture than rather than just trying to memorize random words. So I do like when the word is like in a passage of scripture that I'm like all the words that have been in Genesis 1 through 5 have been easier to learn. So it's helpful how in your video you're using a passage to kind of show how it's used in a sentence.
Yeah, Amanda, that's something that I've just started doing, and very quickly I realized, wow, this is the way that I should have been doing it the whole time, because you can see the importance of a word, and then like with all of these, like it's making theological points. And so you memorize the word, it just isn't this list of 500 words. It's actually an actual thing that's going to be helpful as we study scripture. So I've been encouraged by that. I kind of stumbled across the technology of putting these words in a PowerPoint slide, it's kind of easy to do that. And then I realized you can take a screenshot of the software, and I started doing that for all my classes, Greek, Hebrew, everything, and the students have really taken to it. It's really helped me too. So I'm glad you found that as well. What else? Anyone, something you found interesting, encouraging? Maybe something you're confused about a little bit. We're going to have a great time tonight. So I put this study guide, and you all have access to this through my Dropbox. You were able to access this. There'll be 2 copies of everything in there. One's a Word document and one's a PDF. The Word document you can actually change if you want. So if you download, I think it's the SBL Hebrew font for free. You could download the Word document. You could actually add your own notes to that if you wanted to. But if you got access to my Dropbox account, you should have access to both things. So one of the first things I want you to try to do by Saturday is I want you to try to be able to write this out, the consonants and the pointings. So I'm not going to, be this terrible taskmaster if you don't get it exactly perfect, but I want you to try to get it. So I think by now probably you've memorized it in terms of the auditory sound just by listening to the guy, listening to me. But now I want you to try to write it out. So, as you're going through this week and studying, you want to be able to say it, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'et haaretz. But then you want to try to convert that to actually writing it out. And for me, that was a completely different thing because I can memorize it and say it out loud, but then to make sure I've got all the sounds right, I had to, in all the pointing right, I had to work at that. Don't worry about the cantillation marks. I should have taken those out before I pasted it, but I didn't think about it. But just the vowel pointing, if you can get the vowel pointing, that would be good. I want us to try, at least by Saturday, to be able to read through this whole thing. And I think this is 1 to 5. And I thought we might take just a few minutes tonight and just have a couple people volunteer and see how much of it we could just read out loud. Anybody like to try their hand at reading this paragraph out loud in Hebrew?
Do you want one person to do the whole thing?
If you would like, or would it be more helpful if we did sentences? We could do that too if you wanted, but it's whatever would be best for you guys.
All right, well, I could start it out.
Okay.
Okay. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim vet haaretz hayita tohu vavohu vehoshech al panei tehom veruach Elohim merahefit al panei hamayim.
Wow.
That's the first 2.
Oh, wow. Amanda, I had been in Hebrew a year or 2 years before I could read that well. That's really good. Well done.
Thank you.
Who wants to pick it up there? So where the cursor is and read a little more. Who would like to volunteer for that? Antonio, would you like to try? I heard you read. You all sent the MP3s, and I was impressed. So, would you like to try?
Um, mm, I think the only word I see and I can know for sure is Elohim.
Well, if you got to know one word, that's the
Yeah.
one word you want to know, right?
Vayomer Elohim.
That's good, and you picked up that that's a doubling dagesh there, vi, and then you have to start over again, yomer. So that's exactly right. Vayomer Elohim.
Yep.
Yahi is how I would say it. Yahi. Yahi.
Yeah, that's about all I can do right now.
Hey, that's enough. I mean, you say, I can only read 3 words in an ancient 3,500-year-old language. It's written.
Yeah, he.
Vayahi or. That's exactly right. Vayomer Elohim Vayahi or.
Yeah, he.
Or Yehi or.
Yeah.
All right. Who wants to pick up from here and read? Ryan, would you like to try?
I can. So to finish that one out, it's Vayihi or, and then Vayar Elohim et Haor Kitov.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. Keep going.
Vayavdel Elohim ben Haor uvein Hachoshech.
Oh, that's fantastic. You got the Begad Kafat right and everything. All right, good.
Should I keep going, or you want someone else?
If you want, you're reading beautifully well. So by all means, if you want to.
So Vayikra Elohim laor yom v'lachoshech kara laila Vayihi erev Vayihi voker yom echad.
Oh wow, that is so good. So, like, what we're going to do is we're just going to get where we can eventually, read 1:1 to 2:4, and you're going to be amazed at how the more we do that, you're actually going to start understanding things without actually translating it. So, Vayikra Elohim Laor Yom, you're going to start hearing that. You're going to start understanding it without actually having to translate it. And just give a testimony to that. A few years ago, we were having a creation conference at Bryan, and somebody had given money where we could get the top scholars in, and they all presented different views on Genesis 1, and because I was at Bryan, they asked me to, contribute to that book as well, and I felt a little out of my depth, I mean, Tremper Longman was there, and John Walton, and people like that, and I decided that I was going to read Genesis 1:1 to the end of chapter 3. I was going to read it in Hebrew every day. And I got where I could read it in about 15 minutes. And weird thing happened is I started reading that text so much. And I remember I was in the lunch line, and a colleague, we were standing there, and it just hit me. I was getting the food in the lunch line. I asked my colleague, I said, what's the word for when Moses divides the waters at the Red Sea? And he couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember. But I thought that, on day 2, when God comes to the waters and violently separates the waters, and dry land appears, Yabashah, and Tehom, the water's called the Tehom. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that Moses parting the Red Sea was a microcosm of God parting the abyss on the second day of creation. And I can't tell you how helpful that has been in terms of biblical theology. And I did a history of interpretation and saw that that's a standard Jewish view. A lot of people have taken that view. A lot of modern scholars take that view. And if you're into the debate, what is this rakia thing? Is it concrete dome, or is it, separation between the physical world and the spiritual world? Oh my goodness, how helpful that's been in all that. And it didn't come from commentaries or anything. It's just I read the text every day for a year and a half or however long it was, and it just blossomed and opened up for me. And that's what we're going to be able to do with this. So, the goal is to get comfortable enough in Hebrew where, the ESV's on the shelf and the Hebrew Bible's on the shelf, and your first movement is to, go pull that Hebrew because it's just clearer to you. And, if you can believe me at all, that will happen for you. And the way it happens is just doing what we're doing. Just read it. Just we want to get to the place where we can volume read Hebrew. This morning I was doing a lecture on circumcision and biblical theology, and it was a Old Testament introduction class, and I'd given them several passages to read, a few chapters, and I just opened my Hebrew Bible and I read the whole thing that I'd given them in about 40 minutes. And I tell you, it helped my lecture so much because I could just see things in the text. And that's happened over and over and over again. So what we're doing and getting where we can read and learning these words, it's going to pay us off like nobody's business. So be encouraged. I'm really happy with how your reading is coming. So let's switch over to the PowerPoint. Let me pull your pictures back up so I can see you. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint? Do you see Hebrew vocab 31 there?
Yes.
All right, so we've been over this once, but just kind of a review. Elohim, it appears everywhere. You're seeing it in your reading. And some people will, try to say, oh, Elohim isn't really a plural. And they'll say because, here it has to be singular because of bara. But when somebody says Elohim isn't really a plural, that's just not how it's used in the Hebrew Bible. I mean, there's one place where even Abraham, I think it's in Genesis 18, I think it's that verse that says, when God caused me to wander. If you go read that in Hebrew, the verbs there are actually plural. When they caused me to wander, and we see it here in this passage where gods, other gods. So ahar is the word other, and you see ahar reem is in the plural because Elohim is in the plural. So Elohim is the plural of Eloah, but it's used of the one God of monotheism, and that's why we translate it in the singular. And as we're going through all of this, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me, ask questions, or if something's not clear. But Elohim's going to be a great word. This word pana is face. And in Hebrew, whenever they talk about somebody's face, usually it's plural. And I think it's like both sides of your face. So the pene is actually a plural construct. So literally faces of. And here on the faces of the Tehom, on the faces of the deep, the darkness was on the face of the deep. Natan probably is going to be pretty easy for us. If you know anybody named Nathan, their name means he gives. Nathaniel is the gift of God. Yonathan is Yahweh gives. So if you can remember any of those words, you're going to get Nathan or Natan, the verb give. And this is a place where says, I am giving between me and between you. So God is giving, constantly giving the covenant for the generations of forever. So that's a beautiful verse.
And that also mean to pay, Dr. Davis?
Like to give, yeah. In certain contexts, it could be pay. What were you thinking about there?
It's the same consonants as the Aramaic to pay is the reason why I was asking.
Oh yeah, what you're going to find is all those words you memorized in Aramaic are the exact same three radicals in. I mean, the vast majority of everything that you learned in Aramaic are Hebrew words. But the endings are different. The verbal conjugations are different, but the radicals, the same, they're exactly the same. And so when I learned it Hebrew first and then Aramaic. But it was amazing to me. You know, I'd memorized all these Hebrew words, and then I went to the Aramaic text and I was seeing exactly those same words. And it's like you pointed out, there may be a slight difference, but there's obviously somewhere it was a common parent language. And so I'm not sure, exactly what you would call the parent language. I know that Aramaic, Syriac, Hebrew all belong to that, what do they call it, Northwest Semitic, and those roots are the same in all those languages. So you're going to be miles ahead already for all the diligent work that you did in Aramaic, because a lot of those words are going to be very similar in Hebrew. So bayit and bait, everybody has the mnemonic device. What do you do to a house? You buy it. Bait is actually what you're going to see most often, and bait is the construct, so house of. A lot of words in the absolute form will have one spelling, and in the construct it'll be a shortened form of that spelling. And so when you put it in that shortened form, it becomes house of. So if you just think driving around, you see a synagogue, it says something like uh, uh, Bet Israel or something. Well, that's this word, and it means like house of Israel. And we're going to see it everywhere. And for me, it seems like this is the more common thing you're actually going to see bait. But if you can remember that bayit is the lexical form, that's going to help you. And of course, all the words like Beth-El is house of God, Beth-Ani is house of my affliction, uh, uh, Bethesda is house of compassion. So this word appears everywhere. So if you learn this really well, it's going to help you. Anybody have a good mnemonic device for early in my Hebrew career, I mispronounced this word all the time, and I call it am. It's am. If you can remember in that prophetic passage where God says in the place where it said to them, Lo Ami, or you are not my people, if you can remember that, that's this word. There's that story where Lot fathers children with his own daughters, and remember the older one has a baby and it names it Moab, and that means from father, min plus ab. And the other one, the younger one, has a child, and I think she names that child Ammon or something like that, and it's related to this word. So it's something like kinfolk. I think if we were translating this maybe in our language and trying to get it to sound like that story, but it's related to this. And I think this word is the word that appears in. I know it's this word in Ezekiel 36, part of the New Covenant, when God says, "You will be to me for a people." I'll bet I even put that here. I did. I've been trying to memorize this passage for a long, long time. But and you all to me will be to a people, and that's a very Hebrew way of saying that Hayah plus Le. I think that's even in Genesis 1. Let it be for lights. I think that similar is used. So you all will be to me for a people, and I will be to you all for an Elohim. Halak, oh my goodness, this one appears everywhere. I don't have the number list, but this is a word you just want to remember, walk. And in the Hithpael, have we talked about binions in here at all before? Do you know what I mean when I say a stem, a verbal stem? So let me just digress right here and show you something, and I think you're going to really like this. get your pictures back up so I can see if. So, can you guys see this Hebrew verb chart that I have up? Okay, so I linked this. This is meant to be printed out on an 11 by 17 piece of paper. You have the file. If you put the PDF on a flash drive, you could take it to Kinko's or somewhere and print it out on the ledger. At Bryan, I usually laminate the copy and give it to my students, but this is a diagram that my Hebrew professor gave me, and I've never seen it in a book, but he gave it to our class, and he studied at Yale, so I figure he got it from somewhere. I've used this everywhere, and let me see if I can explain how this works. So in Hebrew, there are 7 stems. They're called binyans. And you can take a word, so that's what this chart is, the 7 stems in this order. And they're the Kal, the Piel, the Pual, the Hifil, the Hofal, the Hithpael. And Ryan, you probably recognize in Aramaic that there's some similar things going on where you have Pa'al and all that. Well, what that is if you take a verb, and let's take the verb kill. If you put it in the Kal stem, Kal just means simple. So it's just like the generic form of the verb. The Piel is the intense version of the Kal. So if I come here and look, this is the word kill. I don't know why in the world in Hebrew the paradigm word is the word kill, but it is katal. So this means he killed. It's a simple form. The Piel is the intense version of the Kal. So what would you think the Piel of Katal would be? Like the Piel is the steroids version of whatever the Kal would be. So how would you translate the Piel? Oh, I heard somebody say it. How would you translate it?
Murder?
Murder? Or can you even bump it up one from murder? Like maybe slaughter or slaughter the daylights out of, or so that's how these binyans work. This is the simple form, and the Piel is the intense version of whatever the Kal is. So let's take another verb. Suppose we had the verb paint, and we put that in the Kal, it would be he painted. What would the Piel of paint be?
Drew?
Amanda, I saw you smile. What would the Piel of paint be?
I don't know that it would be like one, like I'm picturing a masterpiece or something, but I don't really know what verb you would use for that.
Exactly.
Porn.
Like massively do it. Maybe even Jackson Pollock, where you're just like throwing paint on the wall. You're painting, but the Piel is like this intense version. Okay, the Hifil is the causative of the Kal. So if Katal is kill, the Hifil would be make someone else kill. Like he forced someone else to kill. You with me? Okay, this is where the beauty of this drawing comes. The Nifal, the Pual, and the Hofal are simply the passive versions of the Kal, Piel, and Hifil. So if this is I paint, what would the Nifal be? If it's the passive of that.
Was painted.
I was painted.
Yeah.
And if the Piel is like I threw paint all over the wall, what would the Pual of that be?
I was slathered.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was slathered in paint. So the Hifil would be my boss made me paint my office. The Hofal would be I was made to paint my office. The Hithpael is the reflexive. So in the word call, so this is he killed, he slaughtered, he made somebody else kill. What would the Hithpael be if the Hithpael's reflexive?
Killed himself.
Killed himself. He killed himself. Hithpael. Now, that's where this becomes really, really, really cool. So, let me get this back where I can see it. This says Enoch walked with God. And it's the Hithpael of Halak. What does that mean?
Cause him to walk through.
Okay, that would be a Hifil. That would be the causative. That would be the third one over. This is the fourth one over. This is the middle branch of the menorah.
He walked with God himself.
He walked with God himself. He lived his life constantly thinking about that he's walking in the presence of God or something. I don't know exactly what it means, but Enoch did that and God took him. Noah did that. He Hithpaeled with God. In Genesis 18, when God says, walk before me and live, that's in the Hithpael. Walk yourself around in front of me and live. And do you see that we don't have anything like that binyan thing in English? We don't really have an intense. And what we're going to find is we're going to run across PLs everywhere. When I taught Hebrew at RTS Atlanta, a bunch of guys from Chattanooga would ride down, and it got to be a joke, and they would say, "Oh, I'm hungry in the PL." You know, we just weren't hungry; we were like PL hungry, because it's like you get this way of intensifying what you say, and the Hebrew can do that. And then you come across something like this where there's a reason why Moses put this in the Hithpael, and trying to meditate on that and think about exactly what that meant is important, because we don't have anything like that in our language, but they did. And it's part of the reason that we're getting to study this, because we're going to get to see it.
So
Do you think that word mean he communed with God, and he just using that word walk?
Willie, I think it means something like that. That he lived his life where he realized that everything he was doing was in God's presence, and he liked that. It wasn't, being with God something that he did on the Sabbath. It was like he lived his life. He walked himself around in front of God. And God is telling Abraham, hey, I want you to do that. Enoch walked himself around in front of me. Abraham, I want you to walk yourself around in front of me. Hithpael, halak.
And Doc,
Yes.
is it? I don't know, but is it the same language as when Adam and Eve were walking with God in the garden? Is it the same?
It is, but what's bizarre about that is it's Yahweh who's Hithpael halaking with Adam and Eve.
Right. What is strange about it is it's the same language to me would be that it's before in a sinful world. Whereas in the garden there was no sin and he Adam and Eve walked with it.
That's exactly right. And you can see, Antonio, can you not, that what you just did is you made a biblical theological connection that's almost impossible to make in English, and because we just read it too fast, I think. But when you come across it in Hebrew, and you don't see Hithpaels all the time in Hebrew, and so when you see one, you see that yith part, and you see that double middle radical. Nearly always, that's going to be a Hithpael. And you stop and you ask yourself, okay, why is it in the Hithpael? Why is it, a reflexive form of the verb? And then you've slowed down enough to say, why is it so that God Hithpael walked in the garden? How is Hithpael walking different from Halak walking? Because obviously to Moses there was some difference there, and then you start thinking about it, and you start coming with ideas like exactly like you've done, Willie and Antonio, where you start saying, okay, how are these connected? And then ultimately, eschatological Jerusalem is the restored Garden of Eden, and the idea there is we are all going to walk in God's presence, and even there it's pictured as this marriage relationship, where God's created this corporate new Eve, and they're communing in the in New Jerusalem. So, I tell people sometimes I teach biblical languages as an excuse to teach people biblical theology. I kind of laugh when I say that because it's kind of true. I do love the biblical languages, in and of themselves, but what the biblical languages will give you, the whole Bible biblical theology connection. That's just, if that ever gets in your blood, it'll never let you go. You'll never stop reading, because it's just going to open this world of these beautiful connections, and I think you're gonna like it as much as I do. I sneak my Greek and Hebrew books on vacation because I just can't think about going a week, having the delight of reading this. So, halak.
Can I ask a question before you go on?
Yes. Yes.
We spoke a little bit about this last week, and I went back and I did a little research on it. when they was talking about God walked in the garden. But my question is, in the King James Version, it does not say God walked in the garden. It says the voice of God was walking in the garden.
Well, you
So
may
can you tell me, is there a difference in this or what is going on here?
well you may be right, because sometimes my memory isn't the best in the world. I mean, I've put so many Greek and Hebrew words in there. I think sometimes it's made some of those places bad. But let's take a minute and see what we can do with this. And let me get your pictures back up. Okay, I can see you. So
It's in Genesis chapter 3, verse 8.
okay, and we'll do this analysis here. Yeah, so here's the word myth halake. And can you guys all see in the section here, it's parsing it for us? Can you all see that? Where my cursor is? So when I go over the word, see how it says over here, the hithpael. So it says, like in Hebrew, they heard the voice of Yahweh God, mythhalaking, walking around in the garden. And I guess it could go back to this word voice, but I've always assumed it goes back to Elohim because it's closer to Elohim. Let's see what all the translations say. English. So QBE is the Qumran Bible. So this verse isn't in any of the Qumran manuscripts. It doesn't mean it wasn't in their Bible. It just means we don't have that page wasn't preserved. The ESV, they heard the voice of the Lord God walking. New English translation of the Septuagint, they heard the sound of the Lord walking. Do you mind if I'm having just a nerd moment here? Yeah, the Greek does it. It's God walking. It's not the voice walking. It has to be God walking. The Targum, so this Targum Onkelos, Aramaic translation, ancient, he said, the voice of your word heard I in the garden, and I was afraid. Wow, Onkelos doesn't read the walking. The Jerusalem Targum doesn't have anything. Pseudo Jonathan says they heard the voice of the word of the Lord God walking. The Latin Vulgate says they heard the voice of the Lord God walking. New Living, the man and his wife heard the God walking. NET does moving about. Oh, they have a note over here. Going about, walking about, assumes a theophany. This is more than the text asserts. I think that's right, because I think from here on out they've lost the ability to see God. They can only hear him. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a hithpael. It's a hithpael participle right there. And it looks like it is God to me. But that's what you want to do, Willie. Anytime you hear me say something, don't believe it because I said it. You continue to be a Berean. You go home and search the Scripture. That's what we always want to do. All right, let me see if I can get this back going. Hey, I think I got this down now where I can see all you guys and I can run this too. That's nice. So halak, we're gonna do well to remember halak. Yod. Anybody got a good mnemonic device for yod? Some people think the word yod is actually related to yod. The letter actually is being called a hand, and I don't know, maybe does it look like a hand or something there? I don't know. I think the mnemonic device I gave you in the pre-video was Yad Vashem. So if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., to the Holocaust Museum, that's what they call it, Yad Vashem, and it's a hand and a name. I don't know why the ESV translates it a monument, but I do see they've got a footnote there, but I didn't go back and read what the footnote said. But this is like in the phrase, the hand of the Lord was upon me. So I don't know. There are some words you're just going to have to memorize, and for me, this one was one I just had to memorize. And how many of you were confused with this word with, et? Show of hands. How many of you were confused? Because it's the exact same thing as the definite direct object marker. And for years in Hebrew, when I would come across these words, I just assumed that I'd memorized it. Because for years I thought et was with and eight was the definite direct object marker. But you saw in this passage, they're spelled exactly the same way. Sometimes they're going to have the makaf. They're going to have the short vowel when they have the makaf because it's telling you that in reality it's in construct with the next word. When it doesn't have the makaf, it's going to have a saray, which is the long version, but they're both spelled exactly the same way. And one of my students at Bryan told me that some Jewish people read 4:1 that Eve thinks she's given birth to like God incarnate. And I remember when my student told me that, he was a good student, but I thought, Luke, you've misread some source. And he took me to the source, and he was right and I was wrong. And this is the Pseudo-Jonathan Targum, and you can see that's exactly how the Targumists, they have understood this Yahweh as if it's the angel of Yahweh. They've connected it with that whole Genesis 6, which I don't think that's the right way to read that passage, but the Targumist reads it. And so he's reading this et as a definite direct object of the word acquire. I have acquired, and it's almost Yahweh incarnate if you read it that way. I don't think the Targumist is right here, but it shows you that the Targumist has the same problem that we have because the word's exactly the same in both spellings. So it's kind of a weird little thing. You have to remember it's the definite direct object marker, but it can also mean with. And that's how I would remember it, because it's going to be used 10 times as a definite direct object marker for every one time it's used as with, maybe even more than that. So do the definite direct object marker first, and then if that won't work, try with. That's kind of how I do it. So Are we good? I'm not pushing you too hard or anything in this. We good? We good still? Because we can take a break. Do you normally take a break during a 2-hour class? Or do you just do the 2 hours?
Each professor's different in how they handle it.
Would you guys like a 5-minute break? Will it help you concentrate? I talk in front of people for a living. I do it all day, every day. My passage of time is different from most people, so I'll get into this and just keep talking and won't realize. So you guys tell me if a 5-minute break will help you concentrate, or maybe we can just do the 5-minute break, or just even just not talk about class and just, I don't know. Sometimes in my Greek class, I have people tell jokes. Sometimes I tell jokes. I only know about 8 or 10 jokes, and I've told them in every class I've ever taught for 30 years. So it's funny. I wish I knew more jokes than that, but I will tell you about a joke a girl told in my Greek class one time. She sat on the front row, and she was a very charming young lady, and we would, do these intense study sessions, and people would need a break, and so, 35 minutes into the class, we would tell jokes or something. So this girl raised her hand and told a joke, and it was terrible. It was the worst unfunny joke I've ever heard in my life. I was so embarrassed for her. It's like, how in the world can you be that bad at telling a joke? And I'm being a gracious professor, and so I'm trying to put a good spin on her joke, but like everybody in that class felt sorry for this girl. And so the next day came along, and we were tired again, and so I said, who wants to tell a joke? And so this girl raised her hand. She was right on the front row, and like she's waving her hand, and there was no way I couldn't call on her. I thought, oh my goodness, we've been down this road before. She is the worst joke teller, but I called on her. And so she told this other joke, and it's like all of us were thinking, honey, where in the world is this joke going? And then she told the punchline, and it connected the two jokes. The day one was a setup, and like everybody in the class just died laughing. And we had felt so sorry for her as a joke teller, and she had actually set us up by telling the unfunny part of the joke. And for the life of me, I can't remember what the joke was. But I remember as a class, we all just died laughing, because here this girl had planned on taking our ridicule of her as a bad joke teller, and she was setting us up the whole time. I still remember how hard we laughed about that. So maybe one day my bad joke memory will come back, and I can remember that joke, because it was really, really, really funny. And it seemed at the time like, oh my goodness, this girl is the worst joke teller ever. So
in high school, I was on the drum line, and our drum instructor had a joke like that. But he told the first part my freshman year and the second part my junior year.
oh
He
my,
had the patience to wait 2 years in between.
oh my goodness. And did you die laughing when he told the second part of the joke?
Yeah, it took us all, because we were all, like all of us that had started around the same time, it took us about 5 minutes to really connect. because the second part also doesn't sound funny by itself. But then once the first guy was like, wait a second, it like, we could not stop laughing for the rest of practice.
Can you remember the context of that joke?
Yeah, I actually remember the joke pretty well. I've done it a few times.
Have you done the two parts of it?
Yeah, I can normally only go a week at most.
Do you mind telling us? This sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah, so I'll try to remember it. So there's this family, and they're wanting to remodel their house. And one of the big parts of it, the wife is really insistent. She has to have a brick walkway. If she doesn't have that remodel, it's a travesty. And so they're measuring it out, and they figure out how many bricks they need, how many pallets of bricks. And the husband goes to the store and he buys all the bricks. But when he sees them, when he's going to buy them, he notices that they only need an odd number. They need like 11 boxes or pallets or whatever of these bricks. But the store only sells them in couplets. And so he ends up having to buy more than they actually need. And so he buys all the bricks, and they start laying them down. And, the wife is so happy as it's getting laid down. And finally they finish it up, and they're looking at their work, and the husband notices out of all the bricks they bought, they actually ended up using a lot more, except there's one brick left over. And the wife is so happy, but the husband looks down and he sees that one brick, and he's so mad. He's just so mad about it. He picks up the brick, and he just chunks it in the air. And that's the end of the first part of the joke. So you normally leave it there, and everybody's like, how is that even a joke? That makes no sense. A week or 2 years later, you tell the second part, and you say, all right, so one time there's this woman on a plane, and she's sitting next to this guy, a big boisterous guy who, this is back in the day when you could smoke on a plane. And so he's smoking a cigar, and she's getting so upset. She's like, why are you smoking next to me? This is awful. And so she leans over to him and she goes, sir, I really wish you would put out your cigar. It is obnoxious. And he looks over at her and he goes, what do you have to talk about? You brought that yammering little chihuahua on the plane. You got to shut that dog up. You shut the dog up and I'll put out my cigar. And she loves her dog too much, so she says, no, I'm not going to worry about it. It's a long flight though. So a few minutes later, she goes, sir, the cigar is just too much. You have to put that out. And he says, your dog's still yammering away, so I'm going to keep smoking. She says, fine. About an hour later, she's getting a headache from the smoke. She can't stand it. And so she finally says, sir, you have to put that out, please. And he says, I'll make you a deal. You get rid of your dog, and I'll put out my cigar. And she goes, you know what? I've had enough. The love for my dog only goes so far. Fine, I'll do it. And so she chunks her dog out the window of this plane, right? And the guy goes, all right, fine. I'll put out my cigar. So he puts out a cigar with nothing else to do. He decides to go to sleep. What he didn't notice, though, is when she chunked her dog out the window, it was still on a leash. And so once he's sound asleep and the cigar is out, she starts to pull the leash back in. And she pulls the leash in, and guess what's on the end of it? A dog with a brick in its mouth. And so, of course, by itself, again, that part is also not funny. But once you make the connection that the dog caught the brick that the guy threw up, it makes for a kind of funny joke if you can tell it well enough.
That's exactly like the girl's joke. It was different. The details were different, but it's that the unfunny part of the first joke appears as the funny part of the second joke. I can't believe he waited 2 years.
Yeah, he told us that he told it to a friend and waited 7 years. He's a very patient man.
Oh, wow. Well, do you see how our minds have rested and how feel a little bit better now? I find that whenever you're dealing with languages, it makes you concentrate, and you have to come up with a way, or at least I do, to kind of rest every now and then. I do it here at home playing my guitar, but in classes we do it with jokes, and so maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe we can go through all over the course of all our time together. We can go through all of your jokes, and maybe I can get some new ones that I can tell in my classes. We'll have to say do the same ones. All right. So devar is word or thing, and you're going to see it translated both ways. So it came about after these things, ha-debarim, ha-eleh. That's the same phrase in the Ten Commandments. God said all these words. Nachnu is we. I think anachnu is the normal, at least in my memory, how I've seen it. But I got this list as exported file from Logos, so they list nachnu as the more frequent one. Zeh is this. This is the book of the Toledoth of Adam. Zeh Sefer Toledoth Adam. Did any of you find this interesting? The whole 13 Toledos and one in the New Testament. Had you ever seen that before or ever heard that before? I don't know why in the world Matthew's version doesn't have "the" with it. And for the life of me, I don't know why it's not there, unless it's like in music, how sometimes you'll play the last measure and you'll leave off that final resolving note and it makes you think about it. But did you have any questions about this or any observations as you looked at it? Does it seem odd to you that this phrase would occur 13 times in the Old Testament and one time in the New Testament? It seems odd to me. I mean, why do you have two Toledos of Esau? You know who doesn't have a Toledoth that you would think would have a Toledoth? Is there a missing name that you see in the
David?
David doesn't have a Toledoth. Do you see somebody else who's missing a Toledoth? Major Old Testament figure?
Abraham?
Abraham. And have you ever read Matthew 1:1 where it says, "This is the book of the generation of Jesus, son of David, son of Abraham"? I don't know. Is that like God's artwork or something? And do you know about how in Hebrew, the Hebrew people use their alphabet as their number system? Did you know that? A lot of societies do that. If you used your alphabet as your number system, what would be true of every word in the language?
It could be like transformed into a numeric value.
And that's true. And how easy would it be to see that number if you used your alphabet as your number system?
I would imagine fairly easy.
So societies that do that are called, they call it gematria. And scholars are pretty clear that there is gematria in the Bible. The clearest place is in the Proverbs, where it says these are the Proverbs of Solomon. And whatever the number for Solomon's name is, it's the exact number of the Proverbs in that section. And then when it says these are the Proverbs that Hezekiah collected, whatever the number of Hezekiah's name is the exact number of Proverbs in that section. A lot of people are going to connect Nero Caesar with 666 because if you just count up the gematria of Nero Caesar in Hebrew, that's the number you come up with. Jesus's gematria is 888. Do you know what the gematria of the word David is?
14.
14. Dalet is 4, Vav is 6, and Dalet is 4. So, do you find it interesting that Matthew says, oh, by the way, there are 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to Babylon, 14 generations from Babylon to Jesus? And do you find it interesting that, like, you spend the whole Old Testament trying to find that 14th Toledoth, and then you find it in the New Testament in Matthew? I don't know. I find stuff like that interesting. Artistic. I wonder if God hasn't just put stuff like that for us. Ra'ah, do you have a mnemonic device for Ra'ah? He sees. Mine is actually the Greek word, harao, but I don't know if you guys have had Greek yet or not. It may be you just have to memorize that one. Which you are seeing. Yeah. It's also, that verb's used in the Hagar story. You are the God who sees me. El Roi in English. Dever is the word say. But what do you make of the fact that it's in the Piel and not the call?
It's like a very strong declaration.
Like somebody, looks you straight in the eye and says, mark my words. It's funny that the Piel of Devar is what appears in Exodus 20 when it says Elohim Yidaber et kol hadevarim ha'ela. God davard in the Piel all these words. He didn't just say it. I don't know, how would you even say that in English? He declared, he solemnly affirmed, he promised, he said, take this to the bank. I mean, but it's interesting that that's how the word dever is used, and it's always used in the Piel.
That actually brings up a question I had about like the call and the PL and those. When it comes to the PL, for example, is that something that's actually translated, or is that something more so that you would bring out in a study in a sermon to say, like, it looks like this just says declare, but this is in a specific form that actually has this force behind it?
So there's a tightrope you want to walk here. You don't want to take people's confidence away from their English translation. So you don't want to ever talk about these things in a way where people walk away and say, oh, I can't trust my Bible. Because you can trust your Bible. Our translations are good. But to empower somebody, usually you're going to have to come up with a way to tell them that. And the different things you can try is you can say, there are a lot of great translations out there, but in this verse, I really like the New Living Translation because it translates blank. And what it's bringing out is, and then you spell out. I'll give you an example. What can you tell me about the burning bush? What can you tell me about the burning bush?
It burned, but it was not consumed.
Burned, but not consumed. What else can you tell me about it?
It was a representation of the presence of God.
Representation of the presence of God. All right, what else can you tell me about it? I'm going to show you something that's going to make you mad. But I hope it makes you mad in a good way. So, I forgot how long it takes to do this search when I've got all these things open. Usually my computer will do this search in like a half a second, but I have so many programs open that you can see how slow it's making. But if we wait on this, it'll be worth the wait. We are almost there. Okay. So, this is the passage I want to show you. So all of you see BibleWorks there? Okay, so this is the word thorn bush, and it's the word sineh. Ha-sineh. Can you hear that the word Sinai and Sineh are the same word? Like Mount Sinai is named after Sineh. All right. What does Sineh mean?
Thorny shrub.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Where do thorns come from? Are they part of original creation, or do they come from somewhere else?
Result of the fall.
They're the result of the fall. Do you think that God, when he got inside of thorns, talking about bringing people back to a land flowing with milk and honey, do you think God knew he was inside thorns when he was making that promise?
Yes.
Do you know the tabernacle is made out of thorn wood? But God's fiery presence doesn't burn it up because it's covered over with gold. Did you know that? I want you to look at something. How does the ESV translate thorn there? Thorn bush. How do they translate it?
Just bush.
Just bush. Huh. Well, let's look at the Greek. How does the Greek translate it?
Thorn bush.
Thorn bush. So, Sineh is thorn bush, batos is thorn bush. The angel appeared to him in the bush. How does the ESV translate batos there?
Just bush.
New Living Translation, bush. Oh my goodness. Thank you, New American Standard. But even the New American Standard I want you to look at this. New American Standard, same exact word. Luke 20 translates it bush. Thorn bush here, bush here, bush here. Now, let me tell you a little biblical theology. Is it striking to you that the God who got in thorns at Thorn Mountain, telling the people that he would bring them back to the land flowing with milk and honey, do you find it intriguing that to keep that promise good, that same God got into thorns a second time? And if I'm an English reader, there's no way for me to make that connection unless somebody helps me with it. That's unfair, right? How in the world could we miss God at and Sinai? One way to translate Sinai is my thorns. The other name of Sinai is Mount Destruction. God is at the Mount of my thorns, inside of thorns, talking about taking me back to a land flowing with milk and honey. And thorns are the result of the curse. And God is so true to his promise that to keep that promise true, he gets in thorns a second time. And there's no way for me to make that connection in the English Bible unless I piece together the New American Standard. And even then, it's only one of the passages that translates it that way. That's unfair to me, I think. I don't know. Does that make you mad? That makes me a little mad because it's not like it's unclear. I mean, you saw the lexicons, or I guess we should say lexica there, but the connection is there. We just, I don't know, followed previous translations or something, and we've missed a great opportunity to do beautiful biblical theology. Hina appears everywhere. It means behold. Behold, I give to you all the esev. Odd is to or as far as. Until you return. All right, and then so we have the review. Every time I do a vocab, I'll have the new ones that have the biblical context, and then I'll put the old ones in backwards so that you're always reviewing. And that, if you go to my Dropbox account and look, you can find the PowerPoint. That, I don't know, it helps me to review. It may help you too. Okay, the very last thing that we want to learn is about these nouns and adjectives. So, does everyone recognize that in Hebrew, all nouns have a gender? Everyone know what I mean when I say that. So, lots of languages do that. German does that. Latin does it. Greek does it. I think French does it. My French isn't that great, but the only one that doesn't do it is English. Okay, so as English speakers, we've got to kind of fix our problem. But when we do that, and we understand that every word that we memorize has a gender, so it's either masculine or feminine. There is no neuter in Hebrew like there is in Greek. It's either masculine or feminine. And the basic way that you do it is if you put "ah" on the end of a word, that makes it feminine. And if you put nothing on the end of the word, that makes it masculine. Everybody with me there? Okay. So, how many of you have taken Greek before? Okay, you remember in Greek all those charts you had to memorize, nominative, genitive? Okay, this is the only chart you're going to have to memorize in Hebrew. I mean, how many charts did you have to memorize in Greek? Like
Too many.
30, 50? I don't know how many. This is the only chart you have to memorize in Hebrew. And there are just two forms. There's the absolute, which is horse, and then horse of. Now, because this is just a one-syllable word, there's no change. Sometimes you'll have a shortening when it's a two-syllable word, but you've got horse. Susaim is horses, and susim is more than two horses. So this is a dual. The feminine is susa, the feminine dual is susathaim, and the feminine plural is susoth. So, what is the gender of Toledoth based on this chart?
Female.
Female, and is it singular or plural? Toledoth. Plural. These are the generations of. Okay? So basically, you can take the red endings and put them on the end of any word, and it turns it into singular, dual, or plural. This A ending is plural construct, so horses of. And you have like a name or something, horses of David. If you said Susoth David, that would be the female horses of David. You with me? That's not very complicated, is it? That's pretty straightforward. Now, the last thing I want us to do is I want us to read, but I want us to do it a little different than we've done it, because I want to introduce you to something that I love doing. And it's called doing an exegetical outline. And I just want to show you how to do it. Several of my teachers showed me how to do this, and I think you're going to like it as much as I like it. And if I'm not crashing my computer here, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a computer program that's going to help me paste this in Greek. You can do this in Logos with their verse copier. And so I'm going to do Genesis 1 to 5. And I'm going to copy that in my document. And I did it all as one just big paragraph. And I like to make it a little bigger when I do this. So I'm going to make it that size. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in an exegetical outline. That is, I'm going to do it where we can see the grammar. So in the beginning, Elohim created, And what did Elohim create? He created et hashemayim, or et shemayim va'et haaretz. So do you see what I've done? I've got the main clause of the sentence. I've separated into verb, noun, direct object. And I've got two direct objects, so I put them in parallelism so that you can see that. Do you see what I've done there? Does that make sense to you? Okay, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was tohu vabohu. Vehoshek. And do you see how you don't have the word is? You just have this preposition, was upon the faces of the deep, and you've got to supply the word is or was. Do you see how that? So that's standard Hebrew. They're going to leave it out more than they put it there. They call it a nominal sentence. Was on the faces of the deep. And then you got to make sure that you keep these paragraph marks where you're going right to left, or it'll mess it up. And the spirit of Elohim was hovering on the face of the waters. Now, I've got a question for all of you. Do you think this phrase, the Spirit of God hovering, do you think that's parallel with earth and darkness? Or do you think Spirit of God hovering is parallel with Elohim?
Elohim.
It's parallel with Elohim, isn't it? Because the Spirit isn't something God created. It's God as Spirit, right? So in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was tohu babohu, and Hoshek was all Pnei Tehom. The Ruach Elohim. And then we're going to get to use our vast new knowledge of Hebrew, because this word hovering isn't in the call. It's in the Piel. What does that mean? What's the difference between call hovering and Piel hovering?
Soaring.
Okay.
I pictured like there's just like a passive, like a hanging out over would be the call version, and PL would be like a stirring power over instead of just like a passive laying over.
Yeah. I mean, look how the Targums do it. They're doing spirit as the wind. So they're putting Ruach as a created thing. We're putting it as parallel with God. I think we're right. Jerusalem Targum says the spirit of mercies breathed upon, so that's how they're doing. The spirit of mercies breathed upon. There's one Jewish source that reads the PL as attack. The Spirit of God was attacking the waters. One of the things you can always do if you want to know what a word means is look where it's used elsewhere. And, I just realized this search is going to, maybe it's not going to take us long. So this is a PL, again, of our verb. How's it used? Is this a positive thing or a negative thing? This is used of a mother hen lovingly hovering over her brood, right? Is that interesting to you or weird to you? I mean, what does that mean? The Ruach Elohim was merachefeting upon the faces of the waters. Because you know that Ruach of God did you know that this same word appears at the crossing of the Red Sea? In Exodus 15, and by the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, and then here you blew in your ruach, and the sea covered them. Can you see the biblical theology that what Moses did at the Red Sea is what God is doing at original creation, and the Ruach is both places? There may be something to that. Let me get your faces. So you guys can see my document again? Okay, so do you wonder why he's going out of order here? Look how he says it. God created the heavens and God created the earth, and the earth was tohu vabohu. That sounds negative to me. And Hoshek was on the faces of the Tehom. If we did lemma search on that, the Tehom appears at the flood in Noah's Ark. It appears at the crossing of the Red Sea. The waters of the deep are split in two. But then this seems to be positive. And do you see how there's parallelism here? Al panei tehom, al panei hamayim. Do you see that? My point is that when you start doing an exegetical diagram, what's going to happen is the grammar is going to explode for you, because you're going to start seeing how just how many parallels there are in these statements. We talked in here before about how this phrase, Vayomer Elohim, have we talked in here before how that appears 10 times in the text? If you go through the creation story 10 times, that phrase appears. Anything come to mind? Like God creates the universe with 10 words.
And the Ten Commandments are called the 10 words.
And Ryan, what do you make of that?
Just I would probably say just the consistency of God's law and character, and I'd probably draw some systematic conclusions from it, but
I would draw from it that in that God is creating a new kingdom in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, keep going.
Which would be in the New Testament like the Sermon on the Mount. He was given the lesson for kingdom for the people of the kingdom. And when he was given the Ten Commandments, it was for the new nation that he was creating in Israel. Which, I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but that's.
I think you're right. God created the world with 10 commandments. Have you ever picked this up in biblical theology, that when God brings the 10 plagues on Egypt, he's decreating Egypt? Like the darkness, he's bringing judgments on the gods, but he's bringing Israel to a place like they're at primordial creation, and he's making salvific space in the midst of deadly waters, just like God made salvific space in the midst of the abyss at creation. Have you ever thought about how the Ten Commandments, God says, look, I've been really good to you. This is kind of how it'd be great if we operated, under this way. And like, that's such a great deal, and none of us do it. And so in the New Testament, when God gives a law, or gives a spirit at Pentecost, he's writing the law in our heart. And I don't know if you know, but Pentecost is the Feast of Weeks, which celebrates the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. And so Acts 2 is God's giving the Spirit who's going to write the law in our hearts. It's interesting to me that in creation, God says it and it happens. And at Sinai, God says it, and I say, well, I may do that or I may not do that. Like at creation, God says it and it's so. And with backward me, God says it and I may follow it, So like I'm so different from, my fallen flesh is so different from creation, because when God says it, it's so, but when God says it at Sinai, it's not so, because the people rebel and I rebel. And so God has come up with a way to create in us a clean heart, to cause us to walk in his ways. And I wonder if that isn't part of the reason why God chose 10 words to create the world. If he isn't playing with that somehow artistically.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, of course.
Now this is what I had read and studied years ago, but just try to follow me on it before you what it said before you cut me off. The Bible says in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. When Satan sinned in heaven and he kicked him out and he hit the universe, he is the one that caused the earth to be without form and it was darkness and all of that. And so God had to, I don't want to say recreate the earth, but he had to say certain things to get it back to where he wanted it. Because in God's infinite wisdom, the world was exactly like he wanted it. He created it. But the question is, where did this without form and void come from? It came from Satan when he kicked him out of heaven. Once he kicked him out of heaven, then all of a sudden he shows up in the garden. But the Bible never calls him Satan, he calls him the serpent.
Yeah.
So that was just something I heard a long time ago. I don't know if it's true or not.
A lot of people do it that way, and they're reading this verb as became. And so, like, I think the Schofield Study Bible puts Satan's fall here, and the earth became tohu vabohu. A lot of scholars have debated that, and not a lot of people follow that. It's possible. It's possible that you could do became, but what the view is right about is this is negative. Tohu vabohu is negative in the Bible. Everywhere it's used, it's negative. And darkness, the root word of that is restraint. And so the idea is not that light doesn't exist, but that light is being restrained somehow. And tehom, in every place it's used except one place, it's clearly bad. There's one place that talks about the treasures of the deep, but everywhere else, tehom is used as bad. So I'm not sure I can go with like the fall right here, but I do think this is talking about the world in a way that God, and it's exactly as you said it, is fixing it. It's tohu vabohu, and God's going to bring order. It's hoshek, and God's going to bring. It's death, and God's going to bring life. It's absence of His Spirit, and God's going to bring His Spirit. So I think there's some element of truth. I've always put the creation and fall of Satan on day 4 because it talks about God creating a great Tanaim, and that word Tanaim is translated serpents elsewhere. When Moses throws his stick down, it becomes a Tanaim. So I don't know. I'm still working through that rabbit trail. So, Willie, I think you and I are on the same thing, working through that. And Elohim said, "Let there be light." And when you do an exegetical outline, sometimes if you do it like this, you can see the parallelism. Do you see that a little better now? And God, well, actually, if I were doing this, this is how I would do it. Let there be light, and there was light, and Elohim saw the light. So you see light, light, the light. And then what did he see? He saw that it was good. Now this is going to be really important for us when we get to chapters 2 and 3. Because who else do you know who sees that something is good? And God's
Eve now.
Eve, right? She's in Adam. She saw that the fruit ki tov, that it was good. You know where else this appears? This appears in Genesis 6 when the sons of God saw that the daughters of Ha-Adam, and then it's usually translated, saw that they were beautiful, but in Hebrew it says, saw that they were ki tavot, that they were good, and they took, just like Eve took the forbidden fruit, they took the daughters of Ha-Adam. God says, that's it, I've had it. And we're going to look at that, like what that means. But it starts, God saw that it was good. And then, can you see this parallel now? And Elohim Yidaveld, I think that's a Hifil, cause a division between the light and between the darkness. And then look at this. And Elohim called. Can you see this structure? Elohim said, Elohim saw, Elohim divided, Elohim called. And that same pattern is going to be partly fulfilled every day. And the weird thing about this word, Vayavdel, that's an exclusively religious word elsewhere in the Bible. It's used of the veil dividing between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. It's used of God separating his people from the other nations of the world. That's why people are interpreting Genesis 1 as God creating a heavenly temple. He's putting 7 lights in it of 7 days, just like the menorah has 7 arms. There's gold, bdellium, onyx there. There's a special water source. There are cherubs there. There's fruit there. There's this cosmic power couple who are going to guard and keep the temple, just like the Levites are going to guard and keep the earthly temple. And then when you go to the new heavens and the new earth, and it's described as a cube, well, there's only one cube in the Bible, and it's the Holy of Holies. And so New Jerusalem is a cube, only it's not 15 feet by 15 feet by 15 feet. It's 1,400 miles cubed. That's 7 times higher than the International Space Station. A city that's a cosmic woman temple, glorious. God's going to dwell in her midst. She's described as the bride. This whole story is connected, and this temple language is connected, and this naming and separating is connected. And I don't know, I just like exegetical outlines because I can see the grammar when I do an exegetical outline. So, I don't know. I invite you to try to do an exegetical outline. Go to Logos, see if you can figure out how to dump the Hebrew in there and see if you can arrange things grammatically, and the beauty of it will get you. I love doing exegetical outlines because it helps me see things in Scripture. All right. Well, that's what I have for you. Are there any questions or observations or comments? So, same pattern. You got two quizzes. One's a form quiz, and one's a vocab. And so, if you can get that done by Saturday, that would be good. If you need a little more time, that's okay. I know life is busy, but I'm really proud of how you guys are doing. I think we're going to be in good shape. So, anything else you need to know before we go?
Can you do an extra outline on logos, on the logo system?
You can, I think, and I've seen people do it. I've just never been able to do it. I have to do mine in Word. So I copied into Word and just use tabs and move it over. But it depends on what you're most comfortable with. But I do mine in Word, and I just dump it. I copy it from Logos or BibleWorks, and then I line it up in Word. But in Word, to get it to work, at least to get mine to work, do you see these two little paragraph marks there? So this paragraph mark, if you push it, it's going to treat that Hebrew as if it were English. So it's going to go from left to right. And I can't do an exegetical outline. So I pushed this, and I think I had to add that. I don't think that was normal in Word. I think I had to go to the Word tools and add that where I could get it to work backwards. So when I'm, doing this space, it's behaving rightly as if it were a Hebrew sentence rather than if it were an English sentence. But experiment, see if see what you think. I tell you, if you like it as much as I do, you'll get where you highlight similar words. You'll go through and all the Elohims you'll highlight so you can see them all at the same time. And once you start getting carried away with it, you'll come up here to the shapes, and you'll get circles and arrows, and you'll start doing the different colors. And once you ever do that, then my work as a teacher is done, because it will have an anchor in your soul, and you'll never be able to give it up. All right.
Is this what people call diagramming, Dr. Davis?
They do.
Like Wallace and those guys?
That's exactly right. And so
Okay.
Mine, I'm just calling an exegetical diagram, but yeah, it's sentence diagramming and arcing, some people call it. I think Piper has a system he calls arcing. But the one I was taught first is exegetical outlining, so that's the one that I've done all my life. So, all right. Well, I hope you guys have a good rest of the week. It is very much a pleasure studying Hebrew with you, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. See you then.